Welcome to the Agile Maine meetup. This is our March meetup. We have a meetup every month. Typically they're at different companies. I'd like to thank DOE for hosting this month. And our sponsors, they buy us pizza. They do fun things for us. We have upcoming classes. Most of these are at USM, but you can get information about all of these on the agilemaine.com/events website. One more.
It's hiding.
Yeah. No, we're careful. This screen loads really slow.
Oh,
There
I
we
can
go.
see.
Wow. We have an Agile Maine event every year. Typically, it's a full day. We have 11 to 12 different speakers. This year, it's May 15th. It's almost sold out. Hopefully, Corona comes and goes before then, so we can hold the event. But as far as I know, we are definitely holding the event. And it's at USM. Next month, we'll be hosting at LL Bean. Michael Neer from Sapphire Consulting is going to come in and talk to us about the good, bad, the ugly of lean, agile, and DevOps transformations. So we're looking forward to that. Typically, these are the second Wednesday of every month, and it's from 5 to 7 p.m. So this month, we have the Department of Education panel. We have people from the agency and we have people from the application development team. They're going to talk to you about how we are working together to change the way that we work, which is a lot of work, but a lot of fun. So we started this journey about 6 to 8 months ago. The goals that we had then were to try and figure out how to change the way we work. We weren't moving forward fast enough. The goals we talked about were to build in transparency, visibility, to build in some metrics so we could keep track of how long it took for work to move through the process, to build in communication, and collaboration, and most importantly, to build a partnership, to work together to figure out what work we were doing to make sure that we were doing the right work at the right time. Excuse me. So with that, I will hand it over to Kevin, and he will talk to you about where we are.
Just a little bit. So my name's Kevin Callahan. I'm a coach working with these fine folks to help achieve those outcomes. Anyone been involved in change effort, organizational change? Yeah, so a few of us. It's real easy, right? So one of the frustrations that I have as an Agile coach is reading case studies that are all done after the fact, and it makes it seem like, oh, it's just so easy, and it was just like they started here and they got to here and they did all these amazing things and it just was turnkey and no problem. And I have not found that to be true in any of the places I've worked. This work is, I've always found it to be difficult. It's challenging. It calls people to change the way they work, change the way they think. And so one of the things that we thought would be interesting with this panel is to give a little bit of a candid glimpse into what does it look like while something like this is in process, midway through, and what are people kind of feeling. And so we'll give just a quick run through on introductions, then we'll get into some questions and then take some questions from you all. Can you hear in the back okay? Is it getting back there? So just project panelists. If at any point you can't, just sort of raise your hand back there and let us know. So yeah, without any further ado, how about we start with you, Joanne, and we'll just kind of go around, just brief intros.
Good evening, I'm Joanne Allen. I'm the Director of School Finance and Operations for the Department of Education.
I'm Charlotte Ellis. I'm the Data Manager for the Maine Department of Education.
Hi, I'm Vaishnavi Uttekar and I'm one of the product owners at the App Dev team for NEO.
My name is Rylan Kubis. I'm a senior programmer on the AppDev team doing work for DOE.
Hi, I'm Asif Iqbal. I'm the senior developer at DOE.
You're
MaineIT.
definitely going to
Yeah,
have to
you're
talk
gonna-
louder.
That's Asif.
Sorry. I am Asif Iqbal. I'm the senior developer at DOE. I've been here for a few years now, working with DOE to deliver quality work.
I am Pradeep. I'm active developer with DOE.
My name is Tom Windenhausen. I'm a senior programmer analyst for the state of Maine in support of the EPS module of the NEO application.
I'm Karan Sharma, and I'm the product owner for EPS module with DOE.
And I'm Kathy Warren. I'm the Education Data Systems Manager, and I'm the Chief Product Owner for DOE.
Yay.
EPS is Essential Programs and Services, right?
Yes.
So if we use lingo or acronyms that you don't know, just ask. Feel free to shout them out that we're using our own little language up here. So to kick it off, how has technology changed state education in the past 5 to 10 years? And I realize there's probably a lot of pieces of that doesn't touch what we're doing here. So maybe narrowing that to the things we are doing. What has that changed about how you are doing your job, specifically the data and finance groups of DOE?
So we got a new funding formula, and that's the EPS model that Kevin referred to, Essential Programs and Services, and that is extremely data-driven. It's a bunch of calculations within a bigger calculation, so that's amped up our data collection and reporting tremendously. Charlotte's been with DOE for a number of years, so I think she can speak a little bit to her side of the equation as well.
So, state education is, everybody wants data and they want it now. And they want it in a format that they can see it easily and that they can do something with it. And right now, we're not able to actually provide that to them. So that's what and every day they want it more and they want it faster. So we've tried to catch up and get ahead.
From a
Yeah.
From a longitudinal perspective, I've been here at DOE for a year and a half. I started in September of 2018. Before that, I was a business manager in one of our school districts for 20 years. Before that, I was a banker. And I left an application very much like NEO in the banking world that was supporting everything that was happening in bank operations. I went to a school district, and 20 years ago, everything in school districts was still on paper. So we have come a long way in 20 years. We've been through a couple of systems, vendor-supported systems, here at the district, and then we decided to build our own. NEO's 15 years old?
No.
10? 5? 6?
7 to 8 years. 7 to 8 years.
8 years.
8, okay.
8 years.
So we're all working in NEO now, which is 8 years old. But before that, there was a vendor-supported system and some partial systems. So there's been a lot going on in 20 years to come all the way from paper.
20 years ago, we had 4 programmers and a data person that played with the paper.
Yeah. And
Now-
data
now-
entry even.
Right, and now I have a team of 12 plus all the OIT team.
Yeah.
So that's how much data Department of Education has changed with technology and data over
And
the last 20 years.
Just from a short data synopsis, we're collecting counts of all of the students, who they are, what they are, where they are. We're counting all of the staff, all of their money. We're collecting all of the expenses for school districts across the state. We're collecting all the buses. We're collecting all the food. We're paying all of those people based on all of those things. So there's quite a bit of information flowing through the system.
Awesome. And where do you see it going in the next 5, 10 years?
I see the data requests from all of our constituents, who include other state agencies, the federal government, the legislators, the taxpayers. I just see those increasing. So I see the need for more, faster, better.
And more agility in the way that school districts can report to us, because right now it's very burdensome to them, and we need to make it easier for them. So, because the more we ask for, the more work it's for them, and the less time they have to spend with kids, which is really what they need to do.
Anything to add on that?
Just that, as recently as 5 years ago, even after NEO started to be built, a lot of the data collections coming out of the various program areas in DOE were in silos. So a lot of the data districts were being asked for, even across from like Maine State Retirement and here, were all independent data collections. And so we have really only kind of just in the last 5 or 6 years started really trying to coordinate that and ask school districts for things once and then to pass data amongst ourselves at the state level. So that's a change that we're still embedding in our lives.
What's a big success that we've had so far? Anyone want to answer that, or should I call on somebody? Karan.
I knew that. So I would say the biggest success we've had so far is posting the 279s, which is the financial report for EPS, out to public before the deadline. So that wasn't possible because of, without the developers.
I think in years past, that was more of a struggle than it was this past year.
Okay. And can you say just a little bit about the impact, the implications of that report being correct and on time?
I'm sure Joanne can.
So, here's an acronym, the ED 279 report, and what that report is, it goes to every school administrative unit in the state, and it tells them the amount of their state subsidy, and it shows the complex calculation of that state subsidy amount. And that's important because everyone's building their budgets, and they need that in a timely manner. And it's important that it's accurate, obviously, because that impacts every one of our tax bills. And in the past, yes, it's been a struggle to get that out on time to them. And this year, I think things went really smoothly, and the field was happy, and I would say that was a great success.
We were almost 6 weeks late last year, something like that. So to make it on time this year was a really big deal.
And what changed to enable that? What was different this year?
Damien should answer this question. We had stable development staff this year. We had Tom, and people who knew what was going on.
I think we had much better communication within the team this year. Certainly the increase of knowledge between the team.
And the communications helped between the team, which was not silos.
Yeah, I think previously folks tended to work in silos. They tended to not communicate as much and as effectively as we've done this past year.
What I would like to add to that is like sharing knowledge really helped, I think, the EPS team to go be better and make the delivery happen.
You're going to have to speak up a lot more.
So, sorry. It's a sharing knowledge piece which I was talking about, which probably helped the EPS team to deliver ED 279 before time, ahead of time maybe, and that all the communication and
the ability to share the knowledge. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
That helped a lot actually.
I have something to add as well for the biggest success. I mean, looking at a different perspective, apart from EPS, is the mapping sessions that we are having. The user story mapping sessions, the ones that you are actually helping us with. We are getting more clear requirements. Am I not? Okay, so the user story mapping sessions is something that we started recently, and Kevin is organizing them, and he's the one who's leading them. I think we are getting better requirements because we have the business folks and the IT folks in the same room. So we are also having, after that, we're having a 3 Amigos session where whatever tickets that are created based on the requirements are reviewed by everyone so that everyone's on the same page. And I think when we push it to production, it'll be better as compared to what we followed before. So the mapping sessions, according to me, are a big hit.
Yeah, so one thing, just to give some context for the folks that don't work for state government, we're here in this building, Department of Education. These folks are 5 miles across town at the OIT building, so we don't have the luxury of just, if they have questions, they have to actually contact us through some way. They can't just run to our desk or ask us questions. So it does make communication more difficult sometimes.
Any other successes you all want to talk about? So we got story mapping, we got EPS ED 279s.
Paired programming has been a massive success.
Okay.
I was optimistic about it. Hadn't had too much experience with it, but the experience that we've had over the past 2 weeks over the federal dropout reporting that we've been doing has blown my mind. Work with Asif very closely, as well as Jason Quigley out there who doesn't want to be.
Jason, would you like to come up?
You got this, buddy.
Just checking.
And had Kevin involved in some of the sessions as well. And I found that paired programming is really like it's not like an additive effect between like developer skill sets. It's really multiplicative. You take two people, even if they're at different skill levels, they're both going to learn stuff. Both gonna, you know, I learned stuff from Asif a ton, and he learned a bunch from me. So,
Yeah.
at least that's what he says. Unless he's just trying to make me
Can
feel
you
better.
validate
but
that?
I do know some good shortcuts in Visual Studio that I shared with him. But
We just, to throw that into just context a little bit, we discovered late last fall that there were some differences in how we were doing our federal dropout reporting compared to how we were supposed to be doing our federal dropout reporting. And so we kind of rounded up the wagons and said, what are we going to do next? And basically decided to rewrite the whole thing on a very short time frame, because it meant we had to miss a reporting deadline in order to get it right. But it was an opportunity to invest in trying out this process, which we've done. And we're scheduled to head for production tomorrow, right? Or Friday?
Right, yeah.
and just
So-
to add to that, it's one of the first large chunks of code that we have near full unit test coverage on, where we've really tried to adhere to the solid principles. So I feel like it's not only some of the most fun that I've had doing development in my career. I believe that it's some of the best code that we've written, especially code that I've written in my career. So I have very high confidence in it. I know it's really maintainable. We came across a real small issue, and we knew exactly where in the code to go to find that and what to change. So it's been nice. I look forward to doing more of that. It's been a great success.
So did you find that the story mapping sessions were a key to that?
I think that it definitely helped out a lot. I mean, I think that better requirements ultimately lead to better software.
So, to answer that
We have
question-
our first one tomorrow, so
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking. I know I'm on the panel, not supposed to be asking questions.
Well, they're going to help you a lot.
Yeah.
They're going to help you a lot because we
All right.
went through recently and we have all the requirements so clear.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the business owners are not sure what exactly they want and how the priority should
Sure.
be.
So it helps to drive those out? Okay,
One of the
good.
things that's been really handy too is, so we're in testing right now, and we are finding things, but we have the stuff that we did in the story maps, and the very nicely built out user stories with acceptance criteria and all of the scenarios and all of the stuff that we did up front to refer to. So we've been able to use those tools to produce really clear documentation that we need for our instructions and communication to the field to tell them how to deal with these reports. And so it just really has given us much more streamlined quality information that we all already agree on. So that is a real change of pace from some of how we've done things in the past.
Right. Another thing which helped is like building a feature file, which immensely helped me a lot. I very rarely go into the user story and look at what the user story says and what needs to be done. I directly go to the feature file and look into what the scenarios are, what needs to be done, what are the business logic. That's it.
Which is way better than just trying to get Charlotte on the phone and going, Charlotte, what did we say this was supposed to be?
Well, and that's what I feel really good about, because I hope to someday not be here anymore.
Be the single source of truth.
And right now I'm the institutional knowledge because I've been here so long, and I need to get that out of my brain and into other places. So I feel really good about this dropouts things, because even I forget over time, which is why I think some of why we were doing it wrong. Because some of us forget things over time. So this stuff is documented now in a way that we can understand it as well as these folks. And it was really convoluted business rules because of how Maine is set up with its school systems, with some of them having some grades and some of them not having other grades, and the whole convoluted federal reporting piece. So it's really difficult business rules, but because the way that we did it, and I feel it's really been tested well this time. A lot of times we miss scenarios and those weird things show up later and we're like, oh, why didn't we think of that, or why didn't you test that? And all of those things have been caught this time.
That's good.
So maybe one of you can speak a little bit. I mean, we're talking about this thing called the feature file. What does that mean? Like, what's the anatomy of what's the?
It's basically like you're trying to create scenarios. To speak more about it, like let's say, for example, like for a dropout we had this feature file for calculating reported organizations. So basically what it means is like there are like 10 scenarios in there where each scenario is a kind of a business logic. So if it falls into this scenario 1, the calculated reported organization is something like this. So those kind of law scenarios, we write it up in a feature file, and it's very clear to understand. It's very basic for anyone. It doesn't have to have a technical knowledge on those kind of stuff to understand that feature file.
And so how's that different than traditional documentation?
I would say it's much less verbose.
Yeah.
It gets right to the point. There's test data built right into it, which is interesting. I wasn't too involved in the very beginning of the feature file creation, so I'm not too well versed on how that is all configured and set up initially. But I could say that each of the scenarios and the way that they're broken down translate very easily into code.
It was, I was just saying, one of the things that was beautiful about it, Charlotte and I, mostly Charlotte, had to come up with an example for every situation we thought we could find. And so it forced us to go through the different configurations together before we gave it to these guys and actually figure out if there's a kid that meets that thing. And so there was for almost every one of them, but the neat thing about it is what we have in the feature file is those examples. So for those people who really can't stand hearing the definition, just show me what it is, show me what this kid looks like, how does this look in real life? We have those points of reference that we can go back to and look at now that are more live, which has been invaluable to train our help desk folks on what this new collection really looks like, because we know cold what the examples really look like and how they play out in the field. And we're going to just give much better answers to the districts when they're because they have to certify this data. So they're going to get a list of kids that are their dropouts. They have to say, yes, those are my kids. And so we're going to know why they're their kids. And so it just improves the process down the line.
And also if QAs raise some bugs based on the testing which happened during dropout season, and Jason just had to go back to the feature file and just look at it and say, this is not an issue. This is not a bug at all. This is following the business rule, which has supposed to be following. So even if there's a small issue which they found, which we might have missed somewhere with respect to development, which typically happens in software development process anyways. So it helped a lot, actually.
Yeah. And it also stopped us from creating any like imaginary scenarios that weren't real things. Like, you know how customers do that sometimes? It's like, oh, I'm sure this is a thing. Oh, it doesn't really exist in the real world. You know, there's none of that because we had to prove it beforehand.
Excellent. Well, that's a lot of successes. What about our challenges? What's kind of in front of us challenge-wise right now?
Hearing OSIP is a really big one.
That's why we put it right in the middle.
Just one small challenge that sort of piggybacks off of pair programming. One of the things that we learned from that, from pair programs, was, we were pushing some extra hours at times, and when you've been doing this for 4 6 hours straight, 8 hours straight, 10 hours straight, those last few hours, especially if you try and quickly get things done, let's just get this next one done. Asif and I were talking earlier and said, we really probably should have just not necessarily stopped working, but stopped trying to go so quickly or trying to get things done, and maybe gone back and done a little code review or just shifted gears in some other way, and we would have saved ourselves some refactoring, some rework. Just some of the things that happen between like 6 and 8 p.m. We're not as good as what happened between like 9 and 11 a.m.
Right. What other challenges?
Well, I think Charlotte raised one, and I don't know how it works in the real world, but the co-location is a bit of a challenge, I think. I think if we were co-located, some things might get resolved more quickly. But being 5 miles away is a bit, and I know there's technology and we can all get on Skype, but it's not quite the same as having a face-to-face, so.
You must have challenges if you ask people.
Mostly my challenges rotate around communication, since we are not co-located, as you said. It is quite a bit of a challenge, but then we get around with it, with the technology, and going there to meet the team at least twice a week, which makes a difference. But apart from this, working with a team which is full-fledged involved into the project and then introducing a new member, that becomes a challenge for the new member to then cope up with the team. So that, as of now, is probably the biggest challenge we are facing.
Yeah, I've been there for a year and a half, and you know there are still aspects of the system that I'm unfamiliar with, and that I'm still learning. So, those challenges still do persist.
I think one of the
for a
things,
while.
like I've seen the EPS team deal with, which they have adapted to, is the balance between technical tickets versus user-driven tickets or customer-driven tickets, because the developers will see things that need to be done, and the customer always has an agenda. And so just trying to figure out, you know, what we do and when we do it, and working together to support Karan and figuring out that priority. Trying to keep the workflow down to a manageable amount so we're not just turning our board into a parking lot, right, Kevin?
Well, that's a good point that Kathy raises, in that the customer demand, and I'm a customer, so you know I'm a violator, outweighs, you know, the ability of the team to produce work. So trying to stay true to the process and not to push through too much work at them is hard, and not backdooring the process either. It's, because we have constituents who want things and they want it now, and it's sometimes hard to get them to understand that there's a process to be followed. So
Learning to say no is
Right.
a challenge.
That's the biggest challenge.
Says the product owner.
So I think another challenge that we have right now is that we don't have full visibility into the system, that we're still working on that process so that our help desk knows where things are in the process, so when they're getting questions, they can say, yeah, this is being worked on, or I think it's being worked on. The responses right now are not sometimes helpful,
Yeah.
so because we don't have the visibility we would like.
One of the other challenges which I think as a group we're facing even now is we are doing new stuff. We're trying to implement new processes in place, like with dropouts and stuff. We are using story mapping sessions to create feature files and actually try to do something new, which in the development, like BDD, and having more test coverage, the code, that kind of stuff, and still able to deliver on time. So making that delivery on time is critical to this whole process. Whatever we do, if we don't meet the deadline, it's a waste of time. That's what I think.
A lot of implementing the process does involve better communication, which involves meeting with each other more often, which unfortunately stops work. So with that's just an everyday challenge, is figuring out what's important to do, what's an investment in the future, what can't you afford to invest in right now. I mean, one of the things we didn't really say up front is NEO, this system that we're all working in, it's a bit of a behemoth, and it's a really good metaphor for what incremental communication looks like, because it has bits and pieces built on bits and pieces. So it in itself is a bit of a big wall to climb. So deciding we can't just throw it out. We got to keep $2 billion moving between, amongst the taxpayers of the state of Maine. So, we got to keep doing that and figuring out how to do it. That was really bad last sentence.
So good. Any other challenges?
Sorry.
Vash, go.
Okay. I think another biggest challenge is trying to manage planned work and production work. Prioritizing that is crazy, and I think Kathy can speak on that a lot more, because everything comes at one time, and making sure what the priority needs to be set and make sure it's delivered and we don't miss anything. That is another big challenge we face.
Our whole system when we started, which I'm sure is not unique to state government, everything was reactionary. So even things that might have been enhancements were really not planned work. They were like, hey, we need one of these, and start building it tomorrow. A little bit different than that. So, and then we have a help desk, and we have our districts who are our customers. So we're taking in bugs every day that come in with collections or reports that we have to generate. So keeping those things going, we have a year-round calendar of things that are being filed, plus then trying to identify improvements so that we're fixing the system over time. It's an ongoing, and new stuff. We have the legislature, who is also our customer, who are creating new needs, and the federal government, who is creating new needs. Nutrition department needs 4 new reports by the end of May for some stuff that they're doing, and so it is, yes.
That's a challenge.
That is the biggest challenge.
Yep.
And Rylan, you were jumping in as you're now writing.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Pradeep's probably got a challenge. You got a challenge?
Pradeep, you want to jump something?
Working with me, go ahead.
You know what?
I
Pradeep's
got it
biggest
back.
challenge
All
is
right.
not taking the mouse. That is Pradeep's biggest challenge.
Yeah, Craig said.
Actually, when I demonstrate to anyone while pair programming or something like that, I grab mouse a lot so that it would be easier to show the things than demonstrate them. So,
Or to try to find the words verbally and go through this long explanation. Sometimes it's easier just to.
and the other thing is like sometimes it may be in your mind back when it's been accessed some long back.
He's been around a long
Yeah.
time.
So I have been here from 8 years on this system. So
Pretty much the start of Neo then.
He is our
Right.
institutional knowledge in
Yeah.
too many modules, actually.
yeah,
So,
so that would be a challenge for me. But
it is.
and the other thing is peer programming is another challenge. Like where to stop.
Your Yep. I think that this has gotten better over time, but I think early on when we started this transition, it was difficult getting buy-in from some of the team members. For this to work, you really have to buy in and believe in the process and believe that it's going to work, and you have to trust each other and things like that. And I think that especially things like paired programming, until you see the benefits of it, until you actually do it and do it for long enough where you get past the initial learning curve and really start seeing the benefits of it, it's easy to be sort of pessimistic about. And I think we're getting away from that. We're getting past that and getting more people on board every day as we go along, and see the light, if you will. But it has been a bit of a challenge in the past.
It's been really interesting, the number of conversations that I've had with people who, like, encouraging them to do pair programming or to do some of these processes, and they'll be like, no, I need to get this done. I got to work on this ticket. You need this, you need this thing. And I'm like, I'm the customer. I'm telling you, I don't need it. I need you to do this. Like, I can wait till tomorrow or whatever, and just, getting them to believe that, we're trying to invest in this downstream process, and I've figured it out. We can wait. I can't wait past Tuesday, but I can wait right now. Go do that thing.
So it's kind of relearning some habits, old habits, you think you're on a timeline, you gotta get it done, and you're just pushing, and pulling tickets and getting them done, and trying to re-educate and saying, no, it's okay to step back, take your time, do what you need to do so that we get a better product in the end, because that's really what we want, so.
I think you save time in the long run too.
Right.
Because even if you do have to go revisit it, it's a lot easier to maintain, easily maintainable code than it is non-maintainable code. So.
Than trying to bang something out and having it,
Yeah, when you break out the hammer and stuff,
Yeah.
it generally doesn't go too well.
Yeah. Last summer, we set Tom in front of the EPS code in here and basically said, here, just read it until you understand it. And write some stuff down along the way.
Oh, I didn't think he had a choice.
He did a great job, and that is one of the main reasons why we made the deadline this year.
Oh yeah, certainly.
So I was taking a couple of notes. The challenges that I heard you mention in no particular order, balancing production or unscheduled work with planned or scheduled work, communicating within the teams and with our across the organization, knowledge sharing, how to do that and break down some of these silos. This idea that we, while we at least are in the same town, we are 5 miles separated. So there is some challenges around that. This idea around visibility, that we don't have full transparency into our workflows and our work streams. Making sure that we're getting deliveries on time, and that at times we're just pulling too much work into the system, too much WIP. So if we're looking at that kind of set of challenges, what's one thing that we think could make a substantial difference in our efforts together moving forward? And there will probably be several one things, but that's okay.
I got one I can start with.
Okay.
So for me, it's aligning our higher level strategy with everything else we're doing, because it, as the person who's trying to set priority basically from the ticket level to the top, what is it we want to do? When do we want to do it? We've got a bunch of modules to rebuild. We have options of doing it here. We have options of vendoring it out. There's a lot of different choices. So what do we want to do? When do we want to do it? What kind of timelines are driving the different business owners in the different modules? And just getting that really high level department strategy. I hesitate to call it a business strategy, but so that we know what we want to do when and how we want to do it. Because from there, then I have to figure out, do we have the skill sets to do that with? What kind of professional development do we need to support? What kind of tools do we need? What code are we writing it in? I mean, those are not like my things, but I want to make sure DOE is positioned to support app dev in making those choices. And I want to have an educated opinion about it when somebody asks. So who gets to make those decisions? So that would be my big, I like alignment.
That's good. You're chief product owner.
Yes.
What else? What's another a way we can make a substantial difference in our efforts together across those challenges?
So from what Kathy was talking right now, how she can prioritize everything and know, which part of any production support or planned work is due. I think the data calendar that we recently worked on has helped us a lot. We are thinking and planning ahead of time, so we know at least till October what all things are due. Like there are some several mapping sessions that we have plotted in there, important milestones, like all the modules are covered. This is probably the first time we have a clear picture of it. And even our Scrum Master was pretty much involved in this, and she helped us plan everything. I mean, I think it was a 2 or 3 hour session, and everyone came up with their timelines, and she could actually graphically see everything, and she's like, yeah, this is due this time. Let's move the dates, or let's push back the dates. So that is something which is helping, and we are all referring to it, and accordingly, moving around people or moving around our schedules.
We do have the benefit of an annual calendar, and I'm sorry I interrupted you.
And in addition to this, and getting feedback from the technical team as to what is required from the technical end, I mean the technical debt that we've incurred over the years, we need to get rid of those. So getting the right balance needs the communication from the technical end as to what technical debt needs to be resolved, and that in my favor works well.
Can I ask a question? Do you guys keep a technical debt log or a backlog?
Neo is technical debt.
What we do is we document somewhere where which module and which section is to be changed, so that we can go back when we have time in our sprints and everything like that.
I can answer your question.
So it is a backlog.
No, the thing is, I can answer your question better. What we have something called as code metrics, which we run on, let's say, specific projects which we think is a problem, or we think there's a lot of technical debt on it. So we run code metrics on it. We have a tool called Visual Studio, Microsoft Visual Studio, which we using it. So it calculates and tells you where it is high in terms of maintainability, which is the complexity and those kind of stuff. It gives you numbers basically, which we can tell by looking at it, saying that this has more technical debt.
Right.
This project has more technical. We need to fix some of those.
We've really started asking for some of that information, because if we're getting to a point where we may be looking at a vendor option for a module or something or do we even want to do this, or the legislature wants something different, do we want to rebuild it, or do we want to, however, I need to know that stuff. In order to prioritize, somebody at OIT needs to be able to tell me what it looks like. And that was not something that was available to me 18 months ago. So that's, it's huge and a really good tool.
With the help of Kevin, which actually came into picture though.
So, are you working to reduce your technical debt?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way that I apologize if I'm talking too much, but so right now we've planned the next 3 to 6 months, but I'm also out to almost 24. And the way that I work with Karan and Vash and talking about what we see out there is balancing what we know are enhancements, what we know we want to do, and a portion of technical debt reductions. But in order to do that, I have to know the parts of Neo that we think we're going to keep long term versus the stuff that we think we might be spinning off. And so that is very definitely a work in progress.
So you keep talking about spinning stuff off, we might want to put that in perspective.
Okay.
So there are some things that every Department of Education in the entire United States do. Everybody feeds kids, school lunch program, everybody does that, program's the same across the United States. We don't really need to have our own program that does reimbursement of that. There are vendors that do that for other states. Why are we rebuilding that wheel every time? So that's an example of something that we want to get out of NEO. We don't need to devote resources to it. We know we have a limited amount of OIT resources. Everybody here is in Maine, you know what technical resources are available. There's not a lot, and not everyone wants to work for state government. So we know we need to minimize what we have for work for our OIT resources to do. So if we can get rid of something and have someone else manage it, especially if it's something that they're managing for other places, then we want to offload that and focus on the things that are unique to Maine. So that's what we want NEO to be, is those things like EPS that is its own beast that doesn't exist anywhere else, and we need to focus on that.
And that's a conversation we've had in the last 18 months as we've started this process that we had not really visualized before. So that's a game.
And since there were a couple of questions about technical debt, and you mentioned, Tom, your work last summer, my understanding is that was a pretty huge effort to pay some of that down. That we have confidence that was a main driver of the improvement in results.
Yeah, I think just parsing through all of that code helped to increase my knowledge as to how the EPS module functions. So yeah, there were certainly areas that we identified that could be improved upon, and so we did document those. But yeah, it was a worthwhile effort.
But that review allowed us to identify, so EPS has a pre-processing component to it, and we decided to rebuild step 1 of pre-processing, which turned out to be a game changer because a lot of the data sorting was happening there, assigning kids and people to orgs and all of that kind of thing, and there were some integrity issues there. So Tom's work and Pradeep's work too, the team's work, was able to identify that as a high value place to put our time. And there were other things that we just left because we knew we could respond to them differently.
So maybe a couple more improvements, and we'll open it up to other questions. So any other ideas from folks about communication, knowledge sharing, balancing scheduled and unscheduled work, visibility, too much WIP? What's an improvement that we could do?
Reduce WIP.
I did have one more thing I could add about technical debt.
Sure.
And how we will work on paying that back. There's definitely a balance of, we can't just simply take a whole bunch of time and go and work on tech debt. But I think that, if we have something with operations or an enhancement that comes in, a bug or something like that, we can go to the code, we can run some code metrics against it, we can refactor some things, reduce the cyclomatic, complexity, increase maintainability, things like that, sort of at the same time while we're already in there in the code, and that'll help balance, the tech debt enhancements and the operations work stuff.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I think I can speak for Charlotte and Joanne and I all. Having these kind of conversations at the table with developers is so freaking exciting because the amount of initiative that has come out of this process to have these guys pursuing these things is so incredibly helpful and so incredibly the biggest part of being able to do this. Because we knew it stunk. We knew there were places that were so broken, and we had really struggled in our previous process to be able to figure out what the heck it was and make it any better. And so I don't know what that stuff looks like. I don't even know what you're talking about, but I know it's important that you do it, and I need you to know about that. And so it's just thrilling. So good.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
To answer your question, what substantial difference in our efforts, what we can make to make it happen, is what I follow is how can I help you approach? Basically, let's say you have a product owner, you have a tech lead, you have your team. my approach is like, how can I help my team? How can I help my product owner? How can I help my tech lead? Or how can I help the project itself to do better? If people follow every on the whole as a group, that approach, I think that will be make it a better group together. And my brother still tells me all these things, and one of the best things he tells me, like, lead by example. So that's one of the good advices he gives me.
Pictorial is better than speech. Pictorial is better than speech, I can say that.
Yeah, I mean, helping from team perspective, I think even we've started with bi-weekly retros, that's helping us a lot. We're constantly reassessing and reevaluating what we can do to make the team work better. So I think retros play a big role. I mean, in the beginning, no one thought it would be, it would make such a difference, but now that we're implementing it, you actually get to know how everyone thinks in the team. People open up, otherwise in stand-ups no one does that. And we have these recess kits, which you get, by the way, and a couple of other activities that highlight and they show what's wrong and what's right, what we should continue, what we should stop doing. So.
One of the things that's huge is just, I mean, if you're coming into transformation new, is evaluating where you stand. I mean, I made a joke about reducing WIP, but when I walked in the door 18 months ago and basically said, okay, what's the backlog? What do we have for tickets? Show me the program where all your stuff lives, where's the work? Well, we weren't actually using one at the time, but really kind of to fidelity at least. So that was a challenge, but there was an Excel spreadsheet with 2,576 tickets in it. If anybody, like between Jason and Vash, you may know now, how much stuff we got on the board between the three of you guys? Like probably less than 500 tickets.
Yeah. So,
and we've done some of that work, but some of that work just went away because it wasn't really work. It was just storage. It was a bunch of ideas. It was a bunch of stuff. So the integrity of the information matters hugely, and everybody needs to be responsible for it. And that's, I think, something that is really in the process of changing, is every individual is taking responsibility for their corner of the information. So that reduced WIP really well.
A healthy product backlog.
Say what?
A healthy product
Healthy
backlog.
product backlog?
We cleaned it up.
We are sounding a little bit like a commercial here, but it does work.
Yeah.
So
one of the things we had to do here at the department, that in order to help make this work, was actually to create Kathy's position.
Yes.
Because we needed a focal point for the department, because one of the reasons there was 2,500 things in there is that everybody would call somebody at OIT and say, we need this. And we had to have someone in the department that people from the Department of Education could go to, or actually, I said you have to go to.
Right.
The gatekeeper to say, no, this isn't in our priority. We have these other things we need to do. So I was trying to do that while still trying to manage a team, and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So
when I started, the first rule was that basically nobody at DOE could talk to OIT without going through me. And we're broadening that back out. It lasted for a while. My inbox is now legendary as the place where things can potentially go to die, but shouldn't, because we weren't using TFS to fidelity. So my inbox was TFS in the beginning. So that's necessary. Getting things under control and pulling it in and changing behaviors is so much of it. But we've gradually established systems and established processes, and when we're putting it back out, and that's still very much a work in progress. But we just got done having a workflow mapping session this afternoon with our help desk that goes all the way through to these guys. And so we're now looking at really having an end-to-end district to help desk to OIT and back to the district picture of getting stuff done. And I mean, and our help desk turnaround is under basically anywhere from 1 to 3 days. So, work needs to move. We're not letting stuff sit around for weeks if we can help it. So,
Any last thoughts before we open it up? Who wants to go twice? So, questions from the audience. Anyone have any questions, thoughts?
Actually, I have one thing, because I was a part of this team maybe 2.5 years ago. And the thing which I just heard, there's user story mapping and those kind of stuff. We used to do that, so I don't know
what happened.
Yeah, because she just said we just started.
Well, ever since I came in, this was for me it was the first time here. So I'm pretty sure you've already seen that, but for me, I've been here for 2 years, and all the folks who are involved in this session, it was the first time for them as well. So from that perspective, yeah. And I think there are some changes in the way even these sessions are executed now. So I hope that answers your question.
Anyone else want to speak to that?
I think it was a leadership thing. I think it was a system that was in place that some people were part of, and then those people were gone, and then they weren't part of it anymore, and it didn't get maintained. I mean, that's, I think, a very common story, whether it's state departments or, wherever. It just doesn't.
Right, and that's the problem in state government, and not that it doesn't happen in business either, is that you do have a lot of turnover in leadership positions. And when I said stay true to the process, that's part of it. It's got to be a strong enough process. I keep using the word sticky. I want this to be sticky so that if one of us is gone, the process still continues and we still get the great results. So I think that will probably take a while, but I have every confidence that we're going to be able to do that this time around.
And I also think there were a lot of struggles initially when we were trying to do Agile in the beginning. With the co-location was really problematic because we couldn't figure out how to have Paula Gravel, who's our school finance person that does EPS, everyone needed her brain over across town, but she needed to be here to actually do subsidy. So how do we manage that? That was really difficult, and we really couldn't get beyond those barriers at that time. We had to figure out how to staff that in order to make it work. And that's still a work in progress.
Well,
we have not cracked that nut yet. But.
That part seems so far in the past, but it is so true because, so when I walked in, Paula and Pradeep were talking to each other. Paula is the business owner. She's the subject matter expert. Pradeep is the developer. They were the ones deciding what needed to go on in EPS, or some of Pradeep's coworkers. We had no systems analysts in the middle of it. We had no business analysts in the middle of it. They were talking completely different languages. And so that was where Karan came in. We also created his position. There was nobody really between the developer. We didn't have the product owner position really at OIT or the systems analyst position. So we needed translators. There's got to be people who can speak that language in between. There's work in those spaces, and that was huge. That was one of the very first steps we took, that because there's not enough time.
Can you guys talk about the structure of the team and how you added product owners?
So when I got hired, I was it. I got hired as the data systems manager. One of the things I always like to tell people is, as a district user, I actually was not a fan of this system in any way, shape, or form. I avoided it at all costs. So it's really kind of funny that I own it now. Karma, yeah. So I was the product owner when I started, and we got in some systems analysts and business analysts. But then as we gradually started to break the work apart and look at the modules, it became clear very first with EPS that it was kind of a behemoth of its own. So we created the product ownership position for EPS. And then operations is the other area that we have, and we have 2 operations product owners. So the 4 of us now work together to do that. And within them, we have an EPS team and 2 operations teams that are Scrum teams that have their own Scrum Masters and all of those associated parts.
Anyone else want to speak to organization or how we're structured?
Well, I think when you're talking about ops, I think Jason was sitting in the crowd out there. I think we both are playing the role of an SA and a PO. I think EPS has their own SA, and there's Karan who's doing the PO role, but we are playing a multiple role over here. There are situations where the work becomes a lot, but we're coping up with it. Which is fine, like the structure is fine, but I just want to highlight the difference between the 2.
Karan is a BA and a product owner, so his role is a little bit different. The other thing that's a little weird about how we're doing this, but I like it because I think it emphasizes the fact that we're one team, is that Karan and I both are DOE staff, and Jason and Vash are both OIT staff. So the fact that our product owners are not really all business side, is not always the way that works. So. But it's working for us currently. So.
You said you've had improvements in communication and collaboration and knowledge transfer. What are some of the collaboration tools or rituals that you've adopted that have facilitated that?
And could everyone hear the question? Okay, good.
So daily go ahead.
Coming to the structure, actually we have a daily scrum, so that we discuss between the developers what we are doing, what we did yesterday, and if we have any impediments which are like blockages. If we have any blockage, I mean, like, we would refer to those structures where anyone can help in those scrums. I mean, like, they will decide they can help if they have knowledge in that section, something like that. So that helped us a lot in those discussions. Most of the times, what happens is, like, in the waterfall model, like, I'll be given something, I'll be working on that. There will not be any contact with other developers like that. So that Scrum helps in communicating with whatever you have. And the other thing is, like, we have like retrospective meetings, and we have sprint planning meetings where we plan what is going into the sprint and all the stuff. Those make the interaction more frequent in the team.
We still really the whole sprint thing. As far as doing work in 2-week increments, we have by no stretch of the imagination perfected yet. It's hard because so much of it's production support, so it's just a rolling thing. So we're trying to I'm trying to get the planned work into increments where I'm trying to make the ask a sprint-enabled ask, but then prod support's running alongside it. Plus, we also have 2 projects. The Generate project, and we decided a year ago to upgrade the server systems, the foundation under Neo, so we're also doing that at the same time. Both of those projects operate alongside this group, but it's all the people in this group who are doing it too, so we're kind of doing a couple of different things.
So me and Ryan are in 2 different projects at the same time, so we're working like that. And also, does that answer your question? I think you were asking about collaboration tools, what we are using.
Yeah. Like,
So we use Sky for Business for collaboration. We use Microsoft Teams. We use it extensively for upgrades, project stuff. We use TFS to a certain extent, like what the tickets are, where the discussion happens in a lot of.
That's where our boards are.
That's where our boards are, and let's say a developer fixes some code and puts in UAT for testing purpose, and then he updates it in a comment saying that this has been updated, this has been done. So that kind of thing.
There would be discussions underneath the tasks where we can find whatever we changed, whatever we modified, everything.
Yeah, the QAs live with us here at DOE, not actually at OIT with the app dev team, so that actually is also a...
Right.
So those discussions, when we check in and when we assign that to someone else, they check in the discussions and all the stuff there.
Another thing that's more code related, in Visual Studio 2019, there's a feature they implemented called Live Share, and it's super cool because you don't even need to be on the same network as someone. You don't have to be VPN'd in or anything. You start a live share session. We could be in the same room or across the world. It generates a URL. You send that URL to someone. They open that up. It pops up in a browser window. It prompts you to open Visual Studio, and you basically see their Solution Explorer, and it's shared. So if you've used Google Docs before, and you've seen Billy will have a blue cursor and a little B above it, and then someone else will have a green one.
Yeah, it's like live changing stuff. You can see whatever live you changed.
So a lot of times we would sit in the same room right next to each other, and when we weren't pair programming, we would be doing a live share session, modifying different files, and sort of talking about it at the same time. Or he would say, would say, "Oh, hey, check this out." And with each participant, there's a little circle at the top, and you can click on it. And if you click it, it follows them. So it navigates to where they are in the code, and you can watch them type it out. Or if you want to, they can explain it to you, and you can type it out. So it's really, really cool. So you can build and compile code that's not on your machine. It's pretty sweet.
That's an awesome feature, and we just use
it. My favorite tool is Post-it notes and Sharpies. They work really, really well. They're pretty cheap. You can move them around really fast. If you have a big enough wall, you can fill it up with cool stuff.
We should use this room.
We should use this room. Good. So, another question. I think there was another hand somewhere up in the back. Yeah.
Kevin, how do you as a coach keep the story mapping on the rails, and more to the point of this distance thing. How do you decide when to bring in DOE subject matter experts? How do you interact with the SAUs, get their input? SAU software vendors? I don't know, who else would have some input into a particular story?
For story mapping particularly?
Just story mapping, yeah.
So one of the things that you point out an interesting thing. One of the dynamics that we have not yet done, which I would like to do, is the story mapping sessions are still this group of people. And they're ostensibly for someone besides this group of people, right? The district admins or there's other people who this stuff is for who are not in the room. And one of the great things is that we have really well-informed folks at DOE who know, I think, better than most product managers I've worked with, what the life is like for people in the field. Though we don't have their direct representation. So, you know, in my perfect world, we'd pull some of those folks in. I don't know if that's possible or not. But
That's in our future.
Yeah.
We're working towards that. We have a couple projects actually coming up for this next year that will include people
Nice.
from the field.
Cool.
We've already brought them in. You just weren't part of that.
Okay.
You're in the next part.
Well, one of the things that we did, it's sort of Kevin inspired or whatever, is we've opened up some focus groups for areas where we want to do improvement on particular modules. And so we brought staff people, data people in, district people in for those efforts, and had, like, Jason and Vash and Damien, I think, were in those sessions. So we had the OIT people there, which wasn't necessarily something that we'd done before, so that they could hear that. So we did, I wouldn't say we actually did any story mapping, but we did some couple of posted activities and sort of headed in that direction. And that information is very definitely driving the planned work that we have going for this summer. So
And there was part of the attendance reporting too that
Yes,
that
yeah.
we just did. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The other part of your question about how do I keep it on the rails, I think is the word to use. So one of the things
that means you know what the challenge is.
I make sure to start with outcomes. Like, why are we here? What problem are we really trying to solve? Not from an output perspective, but an outcome perspective. And who is that problem for? And get really, really clear. And it's interesting. For instance, we were doing. Vaish unfortunately just stepped out. She's the product owner for we are a homeschool, which we're now calling home instruction. And it turns out that the person at DOE who's responsible for that is really wanting to shift some of that responsibility to the districts. And so she's using, in the goals, she said, I want to make it easier for them and I want to make it more accessible to them. I said, that sounds really important. How do we know we're accomplishing those goals? Those are hard to define, right? And so we had some questions around that. As we got into the mapping session, almost casually, she mentioned, by the way, by statute, these superintendents are legally required to know the location and welfare of every school-aged child in their district. And it went just about like that when she said that. We're like, oh, that seems really important. And it's probably not that many kids, but it's a pretty big deal. And if that's part of what this system, one of the outcomes that this is going for, that we need to solve for, we should probably at least be talking about it. Right? So starting with a really clear set of outcomes that we need to achieve helps focus it. Another thing that I found is that people will say, oh, we'll be talking about one part of a system and then they'll keep getting pulled to another part. And so sometimes I'll just put a piece of blue tape up on the wall and say, let's just everything that needs to be true to talk about this part of the thing, let's brainstorm it to get it up there. And then we don't have to talk about it. The same thing downstream. We can kind of slice out the part that we are talking about. That really helps as well, to let people's minds let go of all of the what ifs and what about questions to just really focus on what we need to focus on.
So your toolkit just got more advanced. You added blue painter's tape.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't forget blue tape.
Can I
One other
add
thing.
something into that?
Sure, Kathy, and then Rylan.
So one of the things for that, we are very fortunate in that we are coming from the Department of Education, because it seems really clear what our mission is. We're educating kids and supporting teachers, and that's really important for lots of reasons that we're all pretty much in touch with. But especially in this situation in the home instruction module, what enabling superintendents to know about where these kids are means is that for kids who are falling off the radar. So they may be homeless, they may be, maybe there's some sort of parent issue going on, maybe they're, who knows what. We're elevating them to a higher level of disability in their visibility in their district. And that really is like a family level, this is what I'm there for. So to be able to connect the developers with that actual reason for what they're doing is so powerful. That's just, I think some version of that's true for a lot of places, but it is really cool here to do that and to have it not just be something that I'm grouching about to them, but then to just be able to really bring it home. Because right down to the individual kid or teacher, it makes a difference right off.
Right.
Yeah, I've been in a lot of meetings with Kevin, and one thing that you often do, you'll put up a little rectangular box, like call it like the parking lot conversation. So if somebody brings up something that's off topic, or you start to go, off the rails, if you will, a little bit, we'll table that. We'll write it down, make a note of it, but we'll quickly refocus, get back on topic.
Because nobody ever does that.
Right. So yeah, another collaboration tool. Another few more questions? Yeah.
So when you guys have discussions like that and you're using the Post-it notes, does that mean you actually do come to one location?
We do.
Okay. And is there, I don't know if you have any examples of tools you can use when you can't do that, so if you are states away or countries away?
My favorite tools for distributed teams, these are getting a little more difficult right now, but airplanes and hotels. Seriously, airplanes and hotels. There is some really promising technologies. I saw a few years ago, I was at a client down in Boston, and they had like 9 probably 40-inch HD TVs all Ethernet networked together into a big bezel-less panel of HD goodness, like a wall size.
The Brady Bunch picture?
Exactly.
Kind of, yeah.
But huge.
Okay.
I mean, it was massive. So you could literally like put a real life-size Post-it note with handwriting on it and walk up to it and read it. So something like that would have worked. There's new generations of projectable whiteboards that track, like you just put a projector and you put a thing on the wall in it, and like when Asif could move a virtual Post-it note at 45, and Charlotte over here would see it move on her board, and it's all wall size. So there's some stuff like that I've heard good things about, but I haven't played with.
There's a feature in TFS. I've only seen it used for tickets, but I imagine something similar could be done with just Post-its with ideas on them. You can actually take a picture of a physical board, so a bunch of, it would be tickets in this case, and then import that into TFS, and any changes for the physical things will actually be updated in all the tickets in TFS. So you can change, if you resolve something, you can move a physical Post-it note, and then you take a picture of that, put it into TFS, and it'll automatically update stuff. So.
One of the things we have tried to do is we have days, like I'm trying to get our schedule. I do most of the story mapping, choosing what we're story mapping and when we're going to do it. And so we're going to be at DOE on Tuesdays, we're going to be at 45 on Thursdays, and we're going to do our leadership development stuff on Wednesday afternoons, just to try and get us not running back and forth across town 3 times a day, because it's crazy.
Yes.
One of our finance business owner, Tyler, just started using ClickUp. Is that what it's called? Yeah, something called ClickUp, which is kind of like Trello, but a little more sophisticated. That he had literally created a Kanban board on the wall with Post-it notes, but then wanted something more interactive where his team members could move it around, and so he read the Phoenix Project and got inspired.
It continues to be an open question, I think, especially as virtual organizations are a thing. I think it's honestly less a question of tooling and more a question that hooks into what Asif said earlier around how much do we care? How much do we want this thing to work for us? Like for a motivated team of people, they will make whatever you give them work. They just will. And you can give the best, I've seen it happen, you give the best class of tools to people who don't care or who can't talk to each other, and it doesn't matter. So it's a different, that's one of the reasons why I like to bring people together rather than buy, fancy tools for them.
But I think it's important to support them with the fancy tools, as you just heard about, what is it that you're using? That I knew I had to buy a bunch of licenses, but that's enhanced your efficiency and your productivity. So there's also that component too, that you've got to be willing to buy some of that stuff and staff up if you need to, and those sorts of things. So
Learn how to use it.
yeah,
And
BD.
as a developer, that's really nice to hear. You know, well, it's not something, you know, that you would want to abuse or anything, but it's nice to know that management has your back if you were to say, you know, this tool would be really beneficial for X, Y, and Z reason. You know, is this something that we could consider, and have that be taken seriously is really special, I think. Because some private places that I've worked, it hasn't been that way. So
one of the things we started to talk about too a little bit more across DOE is a lot of the work that's being done here is within school finance and operations, but there's also the Office of Learning Systems that we support as a data team, but also has like other vendor supported apps. And so going out and figuring out what, like not starting new things, like we've got to stop the shiny object turnover churn around applications, because you can't change it every 2 years and maintain your productivity, because then you're constantly in startup. So pick something you like, pick something that's got some lifespan and make it work, because otherwise you're just always in startup. And so we were doing, I mean, it's kind of classic Agile, don't start, you know, make sure you're finishing things. But that goes to such a high level of don't keep starting projects, don't keep starting new software, don't keep, you know, pick something, stick with it.
Other questions? Yeah, right in the back.
Yeah, if I can, I'd ask two. And first off, thank you. I'm really impressed. I'm sitting here watching Heidi glowing. And I am going to ask if I can come to a staff meeting, because I'd like to pick some brains. But two questions. And the first, I understand I may get delicately answered responses here, but I'm wondering what this process has done for the relationship between the developers and the folks in DOE. And I ask that because we have some relationships with other agencies where I think there would be zero chance of having a mixed panel like this talking about how they work together. So I'm just wondering, has it always been a good relationship? Has something around this process changed?
Rob, Kathy.
So my nickname when I first arrived for a very short time was Mini Charlotte, because Charlotte was a bit legendary in the OIT world, because as she expressed earlier, she was constantly frustrated with DOE's relationship with OIT. And there was, everybody was just used to misunderstanding each other constantly.
And just to put this in perspective, I used to manage these guys. I hired some of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a lot of history to the, you know, and so, but yet they'd all work together. I mean, I think it's kind of classic state government how a lot of that works. And so I came in out of nowhere. I mean, I came from a school district. I'd known Joanne for a really long time working wise, but otherwise I got nothing. And so for the first few weeks of the job, I basically just walked back and forth between the two places and repeated stories that I'd been told about things that didn't work, and said, okay, this thing doesn't work here, why doesn't it work? And I listened to what I was told, and I walked across town and I said, okay, this thing doesn't work, why doesn't it work? And what I discovered was that nobody understood what had been asked for. Like, these guys thought they asked for one thing, and these guys thought they'd been asked for something different. And they maybe had some conversations about it, but because that was so steeped in misunderstanding about the ask, that it just snowballed. Because we didn't have the SAs and the BAs, there was not anybody to facilitate that communication, because we've got Paula talking to Pradeep, and they're just not talking the same language. What I discovered when I did that, though, is that everybody at DOE wanted things to work for their customers, and everybody at OIT wanted to help make that happen. Maybe not every single person, but most people that I worked with. And so these guys will attest to the fact that I spent a lot of time walking back across town, assuring everybody of everybody else's good intentions. And I swear they really want to do this. And I still do that like every day to help create that clarity and communication. And people have stepped up when we have asked, and we've asked a lot over the last 18 months. People have been willing to step up. Has everybody stepped up? Absolutely not. But some people are. and we're going to just continue to deal with that as we go forward. But it is basically Kathy facilitated communication to begin with, and then opening up opportunities through the work that we do with Kevin and through just meetings to create opportunities for people to talk to each other. Karan arrived as a translator as well. You know, that's to translate EPS and to make what these guys were talking about understood to Paula, who is the queen of EPS. So that part of it, the tool is human beings. You know, that's really the big part of it, because I think these guys would have all been very political in the beginning about how they felt about each other, but I don't think anybody would have characterized them as, you know, really liking each other. You know, that was not, yeah. So, and I think that's doable in any agency. I think there are some animosities that are probably really real and really well-deserved, but that most people are coming to work. You don't end up in public service because you want to stink at what you do. Most people who are here care. And if you can engage them with that, it's huge. And find what they have in common. So we all like pizza.
I found that being treated not as just a developer, but being treated as Ryland, you know, a person, and knowing that I can go to Kathy and she's not just, a business person, you know, I feel comfortable calling her up on the phone and asking her a question, and, you know, being completely wrong in my assumption about something, you know, I have no worry about, you know, that she's going to reprimand me or something, maybe a little
But that's why you're making that call, in order to get clarification.
Yeah,
right?
and I feel like, you know, when there's separation, you know, when you don't really feel comfortable making that call, that maybe you just go with your gut feeling and hope for the best.
I mean, assuming best intentions has been huge. I mean, even for people that have been part of this process who are no longer part of this team, you know, they were doing what they knew how to do. They were doing the best they could with what they had to do with. Was this team and where we wanted to go where they ultimately belonged? Maybe not. Maybe they had other choices that they wanted to make. But we haven't approached those changes from a place of judgment. You know, it's been about what's a good fit and where we're headed. And if this is not the culture that you want to be in, then, you know, you have choices to be someplace else. But that has been very civil and very, you know, humane. And I mean, I don't know. Other people might characterize it differently, but I feel like it's been fair and just and open and transparent, visible, all those good buzzwords. So honesty is huge. I don't pull any punches, you know, not hiding anything.
I feel like this process has been more transparent so that the OIT folks realize who our customer is, and that that we are not the customer. So I think it's easy, and because I've done it, being at OIT and across town, it's easy to forget that this is a department of people trying to serve schools and districts. And I think through the processes that we're doing with story mapping, it's easier to bring those points together, and we can see the full spectrum of what we're trying to do.
I mean, and this is not easy. I mean, the EPS guys probably mostly will attest to it, but I mean, I've walked out of meetings. I've gone and, you know, like taken a deep breath and come back to things, or Paula still yells at them, you know, she's still frustrated. She still pounds on the table, you know. I mean, we still have competing priorities. We still do not do things the way other people might want them done. There's still people doing stuff I wish weren't doing it. But you know, but some people are, and we're making our way through it.
Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah. They've all seen me cry. I get frustrated.
I think after we implemented the new structure, like, you know, having BAs and SAs and having them play the product owner role, I think that I can see the difference what it was and how much I communicate with Kathy now. I mean, last year it was completely different, and now that we have identified some roles and structured everything, it's so much easier for me to talk to her, and I know what kind of a person she is and how she prefers to communicate or what the thought process is. Yeah. So I think that structure has played a big role.
I mean, Paula Gravel, who is our school finance manager, single source of truth for finance, was hospitalized unexpectedly. How long ago? I don't even remember.
Not quite a year.
She was out for almost 2 months. These guys picked it up and made it happen. And we made EPS on time. Yeah. So.
And I would just add, you know, from my perspective, there's still a lot of challenges, honestly. Like, this is really, really hard, and it asks people to do things that they're not always comfortable doing, and they don't necessarily want to do, and they don't understand why they have to. And so it causes a lot of conflict, and we're working through it. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to ask people to do. And some days I think we're a lot better at it, and some days we're maybe not so good at it.
Dropouts has gotten in the way of everything. Like, I'm so ready for dropouts to be over, because Jason's got a lot of other things he needs to do for me, and we need to be done.
But anyway, yeah, I do think it's hopefully we're on the positive side of that equation, right? But it is a tough, really tough thing. And so you had a second question.
I do, and I want to appreciate. I mean, what I'm hearing in the general is there is a human strategy here. We're going to put the humans together, which I think is mirroring a lot of what we're trying to do in IT writ large. So I like it. I like it a lot. And now I'm going to think about how to exploit it a little bit with some of our other agencies. But I would go.
Because we're shy.
Together, like, behind the boundaries, like, this is like on the DOE side as well as then something on the OIT side. Together, we're working as one team. That's something like which really helped us to, like, bring everyone together. Yeah, that's perfect. To think like in terms of the state of Maine, like how we are serving these kids together as one team, rather than having like DOE and OIT on one side. If the agencies think that way.
So, to that end, from the developers, I'm curious, before all of this started, and I don't know whether Heidi showed up with the bright idea or how it all transpired, how did you feel about going into this? And now, hearing your positive comments, how would you relay that to your fellow developers that serve other agencies back at OIT?
I can start off.
All right, go Asif.
I think earlier, before Heidi showed up, we used to work as silos, as developers. We used to, given this is the work you're doing and this is your focus on that side, you don't talk too much to other developers and even to other SAs as well, if you're not working with their module or something like that. So when Heidi showed up and things started changing in terms of communication, let's say bringing the whole team together in terms of making people talk with each other and trying to be open and trying to collaborate more with the teams. The structure has changed completely. What we had before a year ago and now it's completely different in terms of team structure. And we're still trying to make developers talk more, collaborate more. We're still in the transition phase. We're not there yet. It's still work in progress, but it's a good place to be, where
they still laugh at me and make fun of me and think I'm overly optimistic.
It's definitely not easy. It's not an easy transition to make. Sometimes it feels like you're taking one step forward, two steps back, but it's really there's a bit of a steep learning curve to it, to the whole process, and it's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. Each agency or each team, is gonna implement things that work. They're gonna implement some other things, find that they don't work, tweak them a little bit. So it's an evolving process, and it doesn't start to pay dividends until you've gone down that bumpy road for, say 3 months or 6 months even, and then you start to see the fruits of your labor, and it motivates you more than to continue making the rest of that change or those changes, and sort of keep going through that cycle of learning and learning from your previous experiences and taking that to the next level.
You two guys, I mean, they have a lot good stories to tell about this, because the ways they develop and the ways they process stuff are very different. And they have the way that they have learned to work together is fabulous.
Actually, whatever it is, like I have the knowledge of the system a bit, and the newcomers, like they were 1 year. He was 1 year back. I mean, like he joined 1 year back, and then I had to transfer it. And he used to discuss openly with me at the same place where we can draw it on the board. that communication came out.
And I think prior to that, like Asif had said, you folks were used to a very siloed work environment. You would receive some work and you would go heads down. You know, you would be very fast, you would be very efficient, but it was very siloed. Nobody outside of your realm would be involved in anything that you were doing.
Well, fast and
I
efficient and sometimes the wrong thing.
Yeah, that I found that to be
but the thing
extremely
is,
frustrating
right.
coming on board, because there was a whole wealth of knowledge that I needed that I found to be very difficult to be able to garner out of my coworkers, because they were so focused, they were working in such a silo.
And he was getting huge pressure from us to learn. Like, Tom, we need you to know this. Tom,
Yeah.
we know you're smart. Like, figure this out. Figure it out now. You know, we need Pradeep not to be the only person who knows. And yet he's facing that ability to learn fast enough and for them
Yeah,
to be
I
able
did need help. I did. It wasn't something that I could just absorb all myself, and
especially the way it's written.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
One more. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do that again?
Yeah, I remember something.
Okay.
I have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
So how do you feel about developing now compared to
I'm sorry. What?
2 years ago?
How do you feel about developing now compared to 2 years ago?
Oh, it is a much better environment now. It's a much more collaborative. There's a lot more communication. You know, we have whiteboards. If I don't understand something, I'll get up and draw, and you know, even though he might be busy, he's still willing to take 5 from what he's doing to get up on that board with me and start to map things out. And I'm a very visual type of person anyway, so it's really been a big benefit for me.
And the other thing is, like, discussions would be going on in the back end for us sometimes that will click us, so we respond back to them. That doesn't work like that.
So we can join in the conversation which we're having.
We would join in the conversation.
So actually, I remember what I was talking about. As we used to have the small teams before, like 3 years back. Like we used to have like 5 small teams, which were working very close to each other and sharing knowledge and everything. We used to do it. But after some time, that the development projects are done, and then we went into a maintenance phase where we're doing more operations work. That's when it became one big team, and people started working in silos. The whole
At that time,
changed.
I mean, like.
So it was during the shift from building something new to a maintenance
phase, yeah.
I see. So that it was kind of a natural transition, a roll into that kind of siloed effort. Yeah, I could see how that could happen.
But what was also happening at that time is not a lack perhaps, but the strategic vision to figure out what was next. So it came to just maintaining Neo. There was plenty of work out there to talk about, you know, the newer things, but that wasn't, for whatever reason, lack of enough of Charlotte to go around as much as anything, you know, to figure out what other things needed to be dealt with.
Well, it's pretty much top of the hour, which I think is our time, yes?
Yes.
So,
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, I'd like to definitely give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for coming out. Audience. I know I'll be sticking around for a little bit if people want to chat. I don't know if anyone else will be around, but feel free to find us if we're here. And thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it.